Hello, so you may notice I'm wearing the exact same thing that I was wearing in my last video. That's because I'm sneakily pre-filming this video because I have lots to do over the next couple of weeks. So I just filmed a young adult book review. If you haven't seen it, click on my tortoise friend whose face is currently very warm. Click here. I read young adult books. I've read young adult books since I was about 16 maybe, when that sort of became known to me with like John Green and Suzanne Collins, I suppose. I don't exclusively read young adult books. In fact, they're kind of the minority of the books I read are young adult, just because I go to university, so I read a lot of classics and stuff like that. And there's a big discussion constantly in the booktube community about young adult books and why we talk about them so much. Is it just because we're appealing to like a young adult demographic, because that's kind of who mostly watches most people's videos? It's a conversation that I haven't really weighed in on all that much in the past, and that's kind of what I wanted to do right now, just so I can sort of point people to this video in future when they ask me my thoughts on young adult books. The reason I read, I think, and mainly the reason is just because I don't know what else to do, but the reason I read is to learn more about myself and to learn more about the world around me. Earlier I was thinking about the books that sort of shaped me most when I was a teenager, when I was like 16, 17, and the books that come to mind are The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, which is one of my favourites. It kind of taught me about death from a really interesting perspective, about books and the power of words. I was studying World War II at the time, and like propaganda and censorship was just really interesting to me anyway, so that book just sort of came at me at a really good time for it to have this huge impact on me. There was also The Colour Purple, which I studied when I was doing my AS levels. The Colour Purple by Alice Walker is a book that was published in the 80s, but it's set much earlier in American history. But then it kind of becomes a story of female community and about like a sexual awakening. It's such an important book to me and such an important book to the world, and I think you should read it if you haven't already. That's definitely a book that sort of affected me in a big way when I was a teenager. And there are lots of others. I read Jane Eyre for the first time properly when I was 17. So kind of a diverse selection in terms of like the authors and their backgrounds and the protagonists and their backgrounds. Young adult books usually have a young adult protagonist. More often than not, that protagonist is a straight white male or a straight female, and there's a love story involved. The settings of young adult books are quite diverse, like whether it's modern day America or some sort of dystopian future. I think that the perils of being a teenager are always sort of the same, and there's something you can relate to in that if you're a teenager and you're feeling those things and experiencing those things, not in a dystopian future, you know what I meant. Which is great. It's really exciting to find something you've felt and you maybe thought like you were the only person who was feeling that. It's really comforting to find that in a novel. But what I want to ask is, what benefit is it to us to relate to a character? I'm thinking about this book in particular, Eleanor and Park, which I raved about last year when I got it for Christmas, I think. And I related to this book's love story in a way, in a big way. And it was nice, it was kind of nostalgic, and I felt like it was just perfectly worded to sum up those feelings. I don't know, do you think it's more worthwhile that books make us look outward into the world rather than inward into ourselves? I guess you can do this with any genre. You can pick up a book and read the blurb and it's like set in Pakistan in the 1960s, and so you think, I'm not going to read that. And so you can do it with any genre. You can kind of stick to the familiar and like characters who are your gender and your age and your race. But I think the thing with young adult writing is that it's just so easy to do that, like to get stuck in a teenage perspective. And I was talking to my best friend about this recently, and just come back to that point, how the books that sort of best taught me how to be a teenager and how to be myself and made me like who I wanted to be, those weren't books like with teenage protagonists. If you think about children's literature, mostly that's about like losing yourself in a world of imagination and impossibility, and it's so far from the world you're in, and that's what makes it so exciting, and that's what like teaches kids to get their imaginations working. And then you kind of move into these teenage books, which in my experience, and in my experience it's the only experience from which I can speak, it's kind of samey. It's kind of your life and your struggles and your boy woes or your girlfriend woes, and like where does that element of just being so otherworldly go? And then sometimes I think I'd like to read books about people my age and the sort of things that challenge me in my life and the things I'm feeling. And that's the same thing. I'm not getting at young adult fiction here. I'm just asking whether perspective is something that we should think about more when we're reading. It's definitely not just an age thing though. It's not that I'm tired about reading young adults talking about young adults' lives. It's the focus on straight white people, and that I shouldn't be right off the bat judging a story which could be incredible and incredibly written just because it's from the perspective of a straight white teenage girl. I get that it feels like I'm sort of tarring everyone with the same brush in saying that every single straight white teenager is going to sort of have the same story to tell, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's very easy to have that attitude if you're a person who has seen yourself in stories, like you've recognized yourself in these people, you've been represented. Yes, of course, I think the story and the writing and so many other things are more important than like whose perspective we have, but I have to be really aware that I'm saying that from a position of huge privilege, and that there are hundreds and hundreds of books about like girls like me. But if you're a teenager whose background is vastly different from the majority of these young adult books, or your gender is, or your body type, or if you're not able-bodied, there's so many circumstances, like people, teenagers from minorities aren't finding themselves in books the way that I am, and that just doesn't sit right with me. I feel like I've talked so much but I haven't actually said anything. I don't know, I think I'm ready to hand this over to you and get some different opinions on this. I'm not saying that I want to stop reading young adult books, I'm just saying that I've started being more careful about the types of young adult books I pick up. And I know it sounds like I'm saying I can't learn anything about the world from the perspective of a 17-year-old American boy. And I know that I could be missing out on the next Patrick Ness, on someone who can tell an incredible story set in an incredibly different world, but I'm ignoring that because of their narrator choice. And you might think that that's a stupid thing to do, but in supporting books that have minority characters at their centre and that have minority authors holding the pen, then maybe more books like that will start to appear, because I personally think that I can learn more about myself and about the world around me, not by reading books that I can relate to, but by reading books that I can't relate to, because it's the things that are foreign to us, it's the things that scare us, and the things that we can't even fathom. Those things can sort of teach us more about the world around us and change us. And maybe you don't read to be changed, and maybe you don't read to learn about the world or to learn about yourself, but I do, and so that's where I'm at. That's my perspective problem with young adult literature. I would be so intrigued if you had any opinions in this, because I feel just all talked out and not any further forward than I was when I started making this video. This isn't the end of me reviewing young adult books, definitely not. I just want you to keep that in mind.